The moment you put a camera to your eye, your focus becomes clearer, and you start learning about where you come from. When I take pictures, I'm exploring the people around me, the streets around me, the world around me. In 1942, Raghu Rai was born in a part of India that now belongs to Pakistan. He joined the Statesman newspaper at the age of 24, the year after he initially picked up photography. In 1977, he was nominated by Henri Cartier-Bresson to join Magnum Photos. From then on, he moved between a number of renowned Indian newspapers and magazines, as both an editor and photographer, while extensively photographing India's people, places, and renowned figures that both did and did not rely heavily on notoriety within India. Later in his life, he extended his photographic voice and vision to capture images of Europe, America, and Southeast Asia, while stretching his influence further through exhibitions that took place in an even more extensive amount of countries. His coverage of a chemical disaster in Bhopal, portraits of iconic figures like Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama, interactions with wildlife, a number of prestigious awards, and an involvement in World Press Photos and UNESCO, along with all of those he impacted through his work, make him one of, if not the most influential photographer to ever come out of India. This is Street Smarts Volume 31, Raghu Rai. This video is brought to you by Dehancer Film Emulation. His images of India often have so much going on that you can take time to really meander in each one of the frames. But they never have too much going on in a way that makes his photos feel unbalanced. Rai spent decades to get to the point where he could capture this well-crafted complexity. He summarizes this by saying, "It has to be multi-layered to capture the complexity of India. It need not be one decisive moment, but several decisive moments. That's what I try to capture in my photographs." You have to remember, India is not one country, or one culture, or one time. You look at that picture of Delhi, and it could have been taken 200 years ago. To begin his career, he had to break away from the practical but safe route that his life had led him on to that point. I was working in civil engineering, because that was what my parents wanted me to do. It was a government job, and everybody wanted a government job in India in the 1960s, but I hated it. A photo that he took, that got published by chance in the Times newspaper in London, made him believe that he had a way to get out of this life that he hated. When this picture was published, it was a revelation. I thought, that's it, I'm going to be a photographer. His journey deeper into photography began in India, and he has come to realize that Indian photographers are the only ones who can truly capture the nuance of their home country. It takes all of you mentally, physically, and spiritually. Almost every photographer in the world comes to India at some point because, on the surface, India is a very easy country to photograph. But India is not something you can just walk into and understand as an outsider. I can walk around and sniff around, and my photography is life itself. It's not a style, it's a way of being. My context and connectivity is with a large space and a larger experience. It's something Rai strove to understand more deeply beginning in the 1960s. During this period of his life, he spent his time harnessing his photographic craft while walking around Calcutta in order to capture the magic of the streets. He reflected on this by saying, "Even a breeze blowing, what it does to you, the entire space around you, that is what is magical." Raghu was driven to capture these photos of the streets as a reaction to the photos he had been making for the news, which he felt were fleeting. When I started taking pictures in the late 1960s, though I started with one of the leading daily newspapers, the bulk of Indian photography was driven with romantic pictorials. Early in my career, I discovered that daily newspaper photographs tend to die a daily death, so I had to look for deeper meanings, to create work that had a deeper understanding that could stand alone. He found that deeper meaning in attempting to capture photos that had longevity, through telling the history of what is happening in his daily life to future generations, as a reflection on how complex India is in both its physical and cultural characteristics. India has so many different environments, religions, and people. There is so much going on that your picture needs to take in. It's because of photography's ability to encapsulate all of these complexities that Raghu believes it can never die, and opposes those who believe that it has one foot in the grave by saying, "The purpose of street photography, or any photography, is to document the times we live in." This could be documenting the lives of famous people like Indira Gandhi or Mother Teresa. But for me, the real purpose is to photograph the lives of ordinary people. This video is brought to you by Dehancer Film Emulation, a plugin to help photographers and videographers achieve the look of film through digital means within the following software. For more information on how Dehancer can help you achieve the look of film on your frames by adding authentic and tested looks, compression, grain, halation, bloom, and more, check the link in the description. Some of the ordinary people he chose to photograph were impacted in a not-so-ordinary way, through an event that was both horrifying and traumatic. Not all of Raghu Rai's work is as heavy as his coverage of this event, but this work showcases one extreme of the broad spectrum that he's been able to cover throughout the course of his career. The Bhopal disaster began on December 2, 1984. It is considered to be the world's worst industrial disaster, which resulted in between 4,000 and 8,000 deaths and nearly 600,000 injuries depending on whose numbers you're referencing. The town was exposed to airborne versions of dangerous chemicals after issues with their storage quickly escalated out of control, from a small leak to a catastrophic failure within a few hours. This caused 30 tons of the chemical to be released into the atmosphere, which then blew over the town of Bhopal in the early hours of December 3rd. The next day, Rai arrived to photograph what had happened. The most iconic photo that he had made while documenting the trauma is titled "Burial of an Unknown Child." This photo remains one of the most impactful representative images of the horrors of industrial disaster. The parents and child still remain unknown to this day. Reflecting on this, Raghu stated, "I found that having their stories told through Magnum and other important magazines of the world brought some relief to the victims and their families." In the early 2000s, Raghu Rai went back to Bhopal to work with Greenpeace for a publication titled "Exposure Portrait of a Corporate Crime." This piece documents the long-term suffering and fallout caused by the chemical disaster. In reflection on covering this, Raghu says, "I don't become sentimental. At the time you see a tragedy, if you worry about your own children, you get carried away, and it's not a good idea. It's important to be a witness, and at times, it's very painful. At times, you feel very inadequate that you can only do so much and no more." Throughout his career, Rai photographed a number of significant figures. Three in particular stand out above the rest, the first of these three being Mother Teresa. Rai photographed her for almost 50 years beginning in the 1970s. The book he created with these photos covers her life's work, her legacy, and her canonization as a saint at the Vatican. One significant moment found in the photos he took throughout her life was when he was able to convince her to allow him to photograph her during prayer. Previously, Mother Teresa had been unwilling to allow this to happen because she felt it took away from the seriousness of the moment. However, Rai felt his work would be incomplete without capturing these moments and convinced her of its significance. Because prayer was such a substantial part of her practice and displayed the connection she had with God. He stated, "If I can't photograph this, then how can I establish this connection and share it with others? My story will remain incomplete." The second of these significant figures was Indira Gandhi, who, up to this point, has been India's only female prime minister, serving terms from 1966 to 1977, and then again from 1980 until her assassination in October of 1984. According to Rai, "I was photographing Indira Gandhi almost every other day from 1967 onwards when she became the prime minister. Indira Gandhi was at the peak of her career, and in a certain way, her growth coincided with my own. Early on, she became very popular within the country through her taming of the Pakistan War, devotion to forming an India without a caste system or religious discrimination, and through programs she created to develop India's food production. Later, her campaigns came under scrutiny that ran out of control until she placed the country under martial law for 21 months during a period called the Emergency." I don't understand enough about the history of India's political system to really fully explain this part, but from what I can gather, apparently hundreds of people died at the hands of those who opposed Indira Gandhi, and then she knew her own death was fast approaching. But instead of running, she faced this assassination head-on. Rai knew her life was complex and could be interpreted in different ways by different people. He simply wanted to capture images of the woman that he believed she was. When I started doing this, I realized that if someone in the future didn't know who she was, and what a strong personality she was. What a tough leader she proved to be. Perhaps they would realize that by looking at these photographs. I began to ask myself, does this picture stand the test of time by itself? For itself? These pictures of her capture some of her essence. Finally, Rai was responsible for capturing images of the Dalai Lama. The opportunity to do this was a rare privilege afforded to Raghu Rai. His images are encapsulated in a book titled A God in Exile that was put together in 2014 after 40 years of creating hundreds of images. These images stand out because of their candid nature that show the figure in regular everyday moments. On his experience with the Dalai Lama, Rai stated, "He left an indelible impression on me, gentle, gracious, humble, and full of wonder. I got the strange yet pleasant feeling of being equals, despite his position. In hindsight, I realized it was because His Holiness behaved with such unfeigned kindness and lack of vanity." Rai has proven to be an adaptable photographer throughout his career. Through the majority of his photographic lifespan, he had shot in black and white, but moved on to color once more and more magazines began to request it. He did this without much hesitation, because he believes it is necessary to change and evolve over time instead of sticking with one specific style. I'm against style. If style emerges from your personal life, your experiences, and your need to photograph, then I understand it. But too often, style is just copied, and you end up with rubbish. In 2003, he moved from film to digital, stating, "From that moment to today, I haven't been able to go back to using film." This has informed his preferences further through the gear he now shoots with. "I've come back to one camera and one lens. For me, you should not look like someone carrying 2 or 3 cameras and a camera bag. And the moment people look at you, they say, 'Here comes a photographer.' I don't want to look like a photographer. I want to look like somebody who walks in and walks out." Before, he was using 2 cameras because during the film days, there was a need for black and white and color. Now he simply uses one camera with a zoom lens that he feels has made him able to be a quick and candid photographer, despite such lenses being big and bulky. In his continued evolution and adaptability, Rai has worked alongside his daughter Avani. Their work together started as she created a documentary about Rai titled An Unframed Portrait. The documentary started as a source of friction between the two, but grew into a relationship of regular travel and photography together. An aspect of their travel together means that they got a lot of the same kind of shots. Rai reflected on the annoyance he would have when photographers would stand next to him and attempt to take the same photos as him, but how it's somehow different with his daughter, who he has grown to thoroughly respect as a photographer. It was only Avani who held her ground next to me. She'll tell you, I'm always there in her head. She takes the first few pictures for me, and then she begins to shoot in her own way. And she says it's without any emotional weight. Today, I can say Avani is the song of my life. She knows how to go beyond the parameters set by editors, to do things instinctively. That's where the magic happens. Rai has remained curious through the subjects he chooses to shoot and display for the rest of the world to see. He's traveled far and wide to capture these images throughout India and throughout the rest of the world. A final statement from Rai to summarize this is, if people can connect with my pictures and enjoy them, that is enough for me. It's like you're walking down the street and you smile at someone and they smile back. There's nothing given and nothing taken. It's just like a little nudge, a recognition of humanity and life. That's what photography means to me. It is my profession. It is my religion. It is my karma. It is my life. Thanks to Dehancer for sponsoring this video. If you want to know how to use their plugin to get a film look for your photos and video, check the link in the description. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, keep developing.